But I mean, it's good to be in the right place.
These great beasts know paths that you can't find on foot. They'll get you there fast and maybe show you something new at the same time.
Can't believe how bad this game fucking ripped people off.
Issues though was the realization that this game wasn't even the same fucking genre as what had been promised all along. From the very moment the day before was revealed, it was positioned as an open world survival
Zombie shooter.
MMO. Now obviously that's a broad term, but it does come with some expectations about scale, about structure. The term MMO in particular speaks to the idea of persistence. You can obviously get into the weeds and argue about the terminology, but generally speaking, when someone says open world survival MMO, they mean something other than what this actually is. So what is this? Well, it turns out that the day before is nothing more than a very half-baked extraction shooter. There is a base of operations in its own instance. It's not connected to the rest of the world. There you can take on bounties, which just involve looting rubbish and then bringing it back home. Each new run begins in a random location in the city. You're just kind of dropped there after the loading screen like every other extraction shooter. If you die, you lose everything you have on you, and if you haven't saved up some backup gear and currency back at base, then your next run involves you running around unarmed, hoping to get a weapon drop before someone else finds you. Spoiler alert, you will often run around looting stuff for upwards of 30 minutes before you're lucky enough to get a weapon drop, and then something like this will happen. So the claim that this was an open world survival MMO was just a total fucking lie, to the point where when the game went live, Fantastic went into Steam's backend and removed the MMO tag from the game's listing, as well as the tag open world, because it wasn't an MMO and it wasn't an open world by any stretch of the imagination. But it also really wasn't a game. Like, it had maps and guns and you could shoot zombies and other players, sure, but that was it. I guess this is where I should talk about my time playing it. So I'm not gonna lie to you guys, I couldn't play any more than a few hours of this because it was just too threadbare and too boring. I went through the character creator, whatever. There was some like class options that were so poorly explained that you just knew that any of the promised stat increases did absolutely nothing, so I didn't worry too much about that. When I got in, I was forced to run around this boring base of operations, talking to these boring NPCs, each of them explaining their boring purpose before sending me on my way. There was no characterization, no storyline, no main quest line. They handed me a datapad thing and were like, best of luck.
Best of luck.
They sent me to a little plot of land where I
They
could
do this
the
in
whole
professional
base building
gaming
thing.
too.
And this was a really hyped up
like
launch
Triple
into
Anus.
trailers because people love base building, right? But it turns out that all this is just cosmetic money sink stuff with no utility whatsoever. Like, you can build a place to rest your head, but you can't actually rest your head there. This space serves no function or utility, and it isn't at all connected to the other game.
Keep its citizens in town, penned like cattle. Help rid Lakeshire of this menace. Kill these Blackrock orcs and bring me 10 of their battle-worn axes as proof. And although Blackrocks threaten us from the north, we've received reports of more in the southeastern pocket of Redridge. If you find any there, then they too should be hunted. Murlocs are becoming a problem. Larger groups of the fishmen are dropping anchor along the shores of Lake Everstill and fishing up a storm. We need them gone before they eat all the fish in the lake. Hunt Murlocs. Bring me 8 of their fins and I might have something for you.
Oh, I have to go do this stupid poison quest, don't I? Damn it, and I just sent my money away like an idiot. Wait. Oh, collective 50. No, I'm okay. I've got the money I need, actually. But I do want to go send weapons. I am going to buy weapons. Okay, so she's got the money. Weapons, one-hand swords. We're looking for 1, 220. Uncommon, usable, go. Higher. What do you mean? What do you mean? No, no. 1 to 20. Higher. What do you mean? What do you mean? What do you mean? That is just not... Oh, usable. I'm sorry, usable. There we go. Okay, I was like, wait, that's just not right. Okay, so... One gold 55 for this decapitating. It's the proper sword. One gold 55 is a lot, but I mean, I need swords, so...
The asteroid
and finally,
is depleted.
this northern militant of the monkey would be nice, but I don't think you can afford it. Oh no, I guess I have to. Jesus Christ, that's a lot of money. I don't think so. I think I've got to wait. Yeah. I'll just wait. It's okay. I mean, that thing's really fucking fast. But no. So we did buy a sword. Oh yeah, and then I'm also gonna buy like a whole bunch of uncommon weapons. The cheapest we can get. Yeah, 5. Is that really the lowest they go? I thought it was better than that. Well, yeah, we will blow like 90 silver here. Not on ones, though. Yeah, we'll buy all your 6 silver stuff here. Yep, and then your armor. Wow, it's a higher margin here, but I'll get further. It's fine. I'm gonna have to blow some money here, definitely. It's unfortunate. Yep, and weapons too. I'm better off with weapons, I would say. Oh, expensive. I don't know. Yeah, maybe we look at higher, huh? Suddenly we start to see like level 7 and level 8 stuff and level 10. Oh, it's so expensive though. No, these level 6s, they're not that bad. We'll just pop those. It's fine. Expensive. Weapons. I think I will buy like 50 silver more worth of like this stuff. Because some of it is higher, actually. I didn't realize, but those are level 10. Yeah, we'll look for higher level 10 stuff, yeah. No, look, it's just expensive all in all. This will get me where I need to go, though. It'll be really expensive to send all this, so I'm going to have to crack it myself, I think. But, I mean, that's fine. Whatever. $75 gold? Yeah, right. Okay. That's funny. So... Yeah, we could crack all this, but there's really no reason to. Not really.
The asteroid is depleted.
And what? I have to buy poisons. I have to go do the stupid poison quest. I just wanted to stop in Darkshire, or whatever it is, Lakeshire. Damn it. Oh well, I got it all sent the way I needed to.
Your credits on inanimate bullshit that serve no function whatsoever.
It's like ever since Rust, all these games want to just rip off Rust really, really bad. And I would say that Rust kind of was mishandled in a way, I think. The engine was kind of bad. The frame rate drops used to be really bad. The combat changes were kind of bad. I hear the recoil change pretty much drove everybody away. Like, I don't know. It's weird how many like Rust clones there are, and how low quality most of them are. Okay, so they're gonna send stuff in the mail. I need to go to assessing the threat, which is all the way south. Yep. And we'll do a lot of this.
Okay, so what about the rest of the game? The extracting part. Well, like I said, you accept randomly generated missions from your data pad, and it's like, find me 3 pieces of wire, and you're like, alright, sweet, let's go get us some wire. And then you walk out of the base of operations door by selecting New Fortune City as your destination. You are randomly dropped on the map, and then you get to experience for yourself how unbelievably clunky and rubbish it feels to play this game. Character locomotion is awful. You can sprint endlessly because your stamina bar allows you to do that, but you can only jump like 3 times before you run out of breath. You can't mantle up any ledges, so if anything is higher than about a foot, you just can't get up it. Most of the game is focused on looting containers, but there's no consistency about which containers can be looted versus which ones can't. So you walk up to one suitcase and you can loot it, and then you walk over to an identical suitcase and that one's not lootable. And don't even get me started on the actual looting mechanic. It is so annoying and finicky to get your character into just the right spot where they can actually initiate the loot animation, and half the time you have to like dry hump each container to find the sweet spot distance to be able to, oh, it's so annoying. To this point, you may have noticed that I haven't shot any zombies yet, or even seen any, and there's a reason for that. There's basically none on the map. The Day Before follows the Redfall school of mob density design, allowing you to explore huge spans of the city without ever
It's
seeing
another
any
Redfall.
enemies. When you do see them, they're just a total joke, man. They pose absolutely no threat. They run directly at you, and you can just shoot them slowly to trigger this like raw animation that they do, and they die in like 4 or 5 bullets or whatever. Contrary to the hordes of zombies that we see in the trailers, I never saw more than, I think, 3 of them in one space at a time, and in my couple of hours of playtime, I think I saw maybe 10 of them total. I did see other players though, and I eventually died to one. This cost me all of my gear and my currency, and when I loaded up back to the base, I had nothing on me. Apparently, you're supposed to get some welfare allowing you to purchase at least a new handgun and some bullets, but that must have been bugged because I got nothing when I woke up, and that means that I had to head out into the world with nothing but my dick in my hands, hoping that I would eventually get a weapon to drop. I assumed that the game would kind of do me a solid and that it would quickly, you know, spawn a weapon into one of the lootable caches, but I would go upwards of 30 minutes sometimes running around unarmed trying to find anything that I could shoot. And yeah, when I eventually did, I'd still die because I had no armor, no healing consumables, no anything. And you might say, well, why don't you just melee instead? That is an excellent suggestion. One that had Fantastic survived as a studio, they might have added to their Jira board. It's impossible to believe it, but this zombie apocalypse extraction shooter launched without any melee function. So if you have no bullets in your gun, there's literally nothing you can do. When asked if there were plans to add it to the game, one of the developers responded on Discord, quote, "We're considering it," end quote. Might have made sense to consider that one before launch, my dude. Look, I could go on describing all the ways that this is awful, but I mean, you get it, and everyone else got it really fast. And I mean like within 2 hours fast. And that window is important because that's the amount of time that Valve will let you play a game before you're no longer allowed to refund it. When it came to the day before though, Valve were more than willing to make an exception. On day one, the cracks were starting to show, but by day two, those cracks were like giant Grand Canyon-sized chasms. The game lost approximately 60% of its player base overnight and a further 20% the day after that. So what was happening? Well, predictably, everyone was getting a refund. An unconfirmed internal leak revealed that the day before sold some 200,000 units, but that 91,000 of those had been refunded. A truly staggering refund ratio. That's got to be some sort of record. We got to get Guinness on the phone to confirm this one. Steam users were also exactly what you'd expect they might be. Overwhelmingly negative immediately. 81% of players clicking the dislike button on this bad boy. This made the day before one of the lowest rated games in the history of Steam, putting it alongside the likes of Overwatch 2, which really goes to show you the different ways that people like to use the user review function, because while Overwatch 2 certainly has its problems, it ain't no day before. So with everyone having refunded the game, these people had a lot of time on their hands, and some of them set their minds to the task of breaking open the game files to see what they could find. Remember earlier how the Brothers Fantastic were all like, don't call us an asset flip, we worked for 5 years on this? Now this probably isn't going to be particularly surprising at this point of the story, but it turns out that that's not true either. A number of Steam users and Redditors began compiling all of the store-bought assets utilized in the day before, and it is a very extensive list. Dozens and dozens of assets, all of them implemented with only the most minor of changes. There's also accusations that the city map itself is a store-bought asset. No one's been able to confirm this yet, but the speculation is that it's based on this American City Packs bundle on the Unreal Engine store. If this is the map we're playing on, one interesting thing to note about it is that this pack was released in April of 2021, 3 months after the game's initial reveal trailer went live. That would make it very difficult to believe that the team worked on this game for a full 5 years as claimed, but at this point, no one really believes that anyway. And just to be clear, there's absolutely nothing wrong with using store-bought assets in game development. Hell, if they make for a more efficient process that lets you make a better game, then absolutely, go for it. The problem is when you spend 3 years straight up lying to people about what a game is or will be, only to then release what is essentially a store-bought assets compilation. At that point, yeah, obviously people are going to wonder how you've been spending the preceding 3 years of game dev time. So right now, we're up to day 3. We've now seen that the game isn't even the same genre as what was promised. It's a bug-ridden mess, it's lost 80% of its player base, and it's pretty clear this whole thing was thrown together in a few months using a bunch of store-bought assets. And with the stage now set, it was time for Fantastic to bring up the curtain on Act 3. The act I like to call
the rug pull.
On December 12th, 4 days after release, Fantastic took to Twitter with a JPEG. Now usually at this point in a botched release, the JPEG is of the whoopsie variety. We're sorry that we didn't meet players' expectations, we set a very high bar internally, and we didn't reach that. We're committed to the long-term success of the game, yada yada yada, you know the drill, we've said it a million times before. To their credit, Fantastic weren't going to go quietly into that good night. Instead, they'd go out in a spectacular ball of flame so bright that we're going to be telling our grandkids about it. Quote, today we announced the closure of Fantastic Studio. Unfortunately, the day before has failed financially, and we lack the funds to continue. All income received is being used to pay off debts to our partners. We invested all of our efforts, resources, and man-hours into the development of the day before, which was our first huge game. We really wanted to release new patches to reveal the full potential of the game.
You'll never make another.
We don't have the funding to continue the work.
Nobody will ever trust you again.
They go on to reiterate that they never took any money during development, which is true, but it also doesn't excuse you just straight up lying for 3 years. Regardless, it was a stunning development. I mean, even with the refunds, these guys had just had a cash injection of around $3 million US after Steam's cut. And at that moment, they decide that they don't have the funds to continue? This rinky-dink asset flip of a game really cost them so much that that sort of cash injection wouldn't be enough to float them at least a few more months? It was a very suspicious claim, but it got even more suspicious days later when one Aloysius Lowe tried to visit Fantastic's office in Singapore, because apparently they're a Singaporean developer. When Lowe arrived at the listed address, he expected to find Fantastic's office full of despondent-looking staff. Instead, he found a co-op working space with no Fantastic staff at all. Lowe spoke to the office manager there, and this manager told them that there had never been any Fantastic staff there, and that Fantastic simply used the space's address as a virtual office space. Fantastic also had another address listed in Singapore,
Scam.
and when Lowe visited that office, he found that they were never there either,
I sell
and it
only
instead
the
belonged
best
to a
gear,
team of management
tested and
consultants.
true.
So
And the
what
prices
likely
are set,
happened
so
here
if you
is that
wanna haggle, then
Fantastic,
go
who are
find a
based in
goblin.
Russia,
I don't get too many
incorporated
Skinners
themselves
in
in
here looking
Singapore
for
to
training.
sidestep
I
any of the
guess I could
sanctions
teach you
currently
something.
being imposed. But in so doing, Fantastic had to make financial
I sell
filings
only
to the
the best
Singaporean
gear,
government.
tested and true.
Lowe got hold
And the
of
prices
those.
are set.
It turns out that
So if you
Fantastic
want to
filed
haggle, then go
$3.4
find a
million
goblin.
in revenue in 2022, and the two brothers paid themselves a handsome salary of around $200,000. They also billed a travel expense of over $308,000 in a single year, which is like insanity. That's roughly $25,000 a month on travel. But coming back to that $3.4 million in revenue, Fantastic declared a profit of nearly $1 million in 2022 after paying out all of those salary and travel costs. On their balance sheet, they list $1.4 million in cash just sitting in their account. Combine that with the roughly $3 million brought in from the launch of the game, plus any additional funding that came from the publisher Mytona, and it becomes very difficult to believe that this company could suddenly find itself insolvent inside of just 4 days. Either way, from this point onwards, things moved pretty quickly. Valve took the extraordinarily rare step of delisting the game from their storefront so you could see it, but you could no longer purchase it. The brothers Fantastic set about scrubbing any record of themselves or their scam from the internet. Just after this announcement went live, they deleted their Twitter handles, their LinkedIn profiles, and they also fully scrubbed their YouTube channel, deleting every single video. These guys really do not understand how the internet works, and it is adorable. Soon after this, publisher Mytona would put up their own JPEG, this time promising to offer refunds to any players that requested. Okay, that's cool, appreciate that, but according to Fantastic, Mytona had been reviewing and approving the day before at various project milestones. They also ran point on the legal
Welcome to
battle
the
over
Bank
the
of
trademark
Stormwind.
dispute,
We
and as
offer
publisher,
financial
they would have led
accounts
the
and
marketing
safety
effort on this,
deposit boxes for
namely the
valuable
creation
items.
of all of
Do you
those
already
fake
have an account
trailers.
with us, man?
Mytona is absolutely as
ever
culpable
stolen
for this
anything
as
out
is
of here.
Fantastic,
Not in the
perhaps
whole
even more so,
history of
because
the
Fantastic
whole
couldn't have got as
history.
far as they did without a publisher to enable them. The offer of refunds is welcome, but many people will not refund this game because they aren't terminally online and won't know to do it. They'll just be stuck with their purchase, and Mytona will keep their money. My hope is that Valve initiates an automatic refund process for all purchases, but I've never seen them do that before, and I wouldn't expect them to start now. So that's all the substance. Now let's have a little fun and bring this home. When it was clear what had gone down, it was time to start dancing on the corpse of this game. DayZ, an actual open-world MMO survival zombie game, put up their own white JPEG that read as follows, quote, "Today, we want to primarily celebrate, for no reason at all, the remarkable 10-year anniversary of DayZ," end quote. They thank everyone for all their support before going on to list all of their prior updates in formatting that was a little too familiar. They'd go on to sign it, "Dead Game," with the font strike through.
These
Not
great
exactly
beasts
subtle, but
know
still good
paths
for a
that you
laugh.
can't find
A few
on
days
foot.
later,
They'll
they were
get you
back,
there
this time
fast and
partnering up
maybe
with another
show you
survival
something
game
new
called
at the same
Icarus,
time.
and they were hosting a
Where is
sale
it
that
you
they
would like
titled
to go
The
last?
Day
For
After.
just a few coin, my
33% off
griffins can
both
get you
games on
there
Steam.
faster than even the
Absolutely love to
swiftest
see it.
horse.
Tip of the hat to the marketing department on that one. Because the day before was so bad, basically no one bothered to take the time to review it. The only major outlet to do so was IGN. They scored the game a 1 out of 10, the first time in more than a decade that they scored a game that low, by the way. They said of it, quote, "The Day Before is easily one of the worst games I've ever played, to the point where I'm afraid to continue running it on my PC. And if you didn't manage to try it, you can count yourself as one of the lucky ones," end quote. The dunks continued across all of social media and really culminated in this moment. Fantastic tweeted out that they were working to deliver refunds through Mytona, and someone responded being like, "This is terrible, you guys are an absolute disgrace to the video games industry," etc. Fantastic's actual official Twitter account responded with this, quote, "This was our first big experience. Shit happens," end quote. Shit happens. Yes, it certainly does. I wish I could say that there was some lesson to be learned in all of this, but the truth is, there isn't. While I can't recall a bait and switch as brazen and as shameless as this, I think we've all felt the overall contours of this many times before and will doubtless feel them again in future. Fake trailers work, hype works. Even when there's a critical mass of people calling something a scam and warning people about it, there's still going to be enough people willing to stick their fingers in their ears and hand over their cash. I mean, think about how many actual proper video games flopped this year that deserve to do better. That Warhammer Age of Sigmar RTS, massively undersold. Immortals of Avium was far from perfect, but it flopped so badly that the studio had to initiate massive layoffs. There's unconfirmed reports that Alan Wake 2 is selling poorly, and that's like Game of the Year runner-up. Shadow Gambit was a fantastic title that sold so poorly that it resulted in the closure of the studio. And here you've got a game that was an obvious scam right from the jump, and it manages to sell through 200,000 units on day one. It had a successful launch on the back of nothing but fake trailers and lies, and while I would like to think this would give us pause, I suspect it's really only going to serve as a the next unscrupulous outfit that comes along hoping to recreate Fantastic's business model. Only next time, they'll have the sense to ask for cash up front. As for what comes next, who can say? Clearly the brothers Fantastic are done, as is their studio. That means that the service for the day before will come down eventually, and if Prop Night is to continue, it'll need to be managed by another studio. But I can't imagine anyone wanting to inherit that poison chalice. There will be refunds issued and reckoning back at Mytona HQ, but for the rest of us, the best we can take away from all of this is the story of having lived it. IGN said that if you didn't experience this for yourself, then you're one of the lucky ones, but I disagree. We were witness to gaming history in this moment, and like Cyberpunk at launch on last-gen consoles and No Man's Sky at launch, or believing anything Peter Molyneux has ever said, we will wear these scars proudly and tell these stories for years to come. That is why I made this video, so we will never forget all of the shit, and we can always look back and laugh at how these clowns ever thought they might get away with it. Thank you very much for watching. Remember to like the video, and I'll see you next time. Alrighty, new products from this video's sponsor, Ridge. This is always exciting because whatever
and the beginning of the 2000s. If you were around in the 1990s and the beginning of the 2000s, you more than likely were a victim of the scam we're going to be discussing today. This scam ran for over a decade
Monopoly.
and was one of the greatest and most fascinating
Monopoly.
practices of all time.
The Monopoly
Because from
scam.
1989 until 2001, there were basically no legitimate winners of the high-value prizes from any of the McDonald's games. From McDonald's Monopoly to Scrabble to Who Wants to Be a Millionaire, none of the winners for over 12 years were real, and not an iota of suspicion was raised by one of the most famous and profitable companies in the entire world. Instead of winners randomly winning prizes by tearing off the game pieces on McDonald's menu items, the high-value prizes were being stolen and sold for hundreds of thousands of dollars. McDonald's didn't have a clue, and the only reason this scam was discovered was because an informant called in a tip to the FBI. This story is packed with crazy twists and turns, and after becoming fascinated with the story a few years ago myself,
26
I wanted to
silver,
leave no stone unturned, and I went home to Tampa, Florida to interview a person who was the reason this entire $30 million scam came crashing down around McDonald's.
I don't know. I think that one sells,
so sit back,
actually.
relax, grab a coffee or a drink, and let's dive in to one of the most fascinating scams of all time, the McDonald's Monopoly scam.
Yep. I knew it when I looked at it. I was like, oh my god.
Simon Marketing was a company in Atlanta, Georgia that in 1980 was tasked by their biggest client to create a promotion aimed at getting more families to visit their client's establishment. Simon Marketing hit it out of the park when they developed the iconic Happy Meal in 1980. Today, over 40 years later, Happy Meals can still be purchased around the globe at one of the most successful and widely recognized businesses in the world, McDonald's. After Simon developed the Happy Meal, McDonald's was so pleased by the result, and in 1987 they tasked Simon Marketing with creating a new promotion, but this time they wanted it to be for adults. So after much thought and deliberation, Simon created and launched a new exciting game at McDonald's, Monopoly. The Monopoly game was extremely successful for McDonald's, and they also ran a number of other similar games over the years, including Scrabble and Who Wants to Be a Millionaire. While each game had its own unique characteristics, the basic premise was the same. During a certain period of time, the majority of McDonald's menu items would be sold with tearaway tabs that could either reveal an instant prize-winning ticket or could be part of a pair, trio, or quarter that when collected with the other missing pieces could be redeemed for a prize. When most people think about the competition, they think about peeling the tickets off the McDonald's food and beverage containers, but a lot of people don't know that you can actually just go into any McDonald's and ask for a game piece while the game is taking place. You can do this once a day for the entire promotion. This is why all promotions have that little line, "Purchase not necessary," on them, because companies cannot require participants to make purchases to enter or to win sweepstakes, because if they did, it would be considered gambling. So people have to be allowed to play for free in order to get around gambling regulations. Every time the competition ran, there was slightly different prizes, but generally there were $2 million pieces, one instant prize winner and one winner who needed to collect both pieces, Park Place and Boardwalk. Aside from the two $1 million winning pieces, there were other various denomination of winning tickets: $500,000, $200,000, $100,000, $50K, $25K, and so on. There were also homes, cars, vacations, game consoles, computers, gift cards, home theaters, payments towards your mortgage, travel money, gift cards, and other common prizes such as free McDonald's menu items. The menu items were very common to win, with about 1 in 4 tickets being for a free menu item, such as free fries, free cheeseburgers, free McMuffins, free sodas, and so on. People loved this game, and it was so successful that McDonald's saw their sales climb around 40% when they ran Monopoly or one of the other tear ticket games. With the games being so successful, McDonald's left it in the hands of Simon Marketing to run. McDonald's themselves didn't really know too much about the game, how Simon went about conducting it, how they went about protecting those tickets that were worth millions of dollars, because McDonald's was pretty happy with Simon as they continued to see people winning, they continued to see huge increases in their profits, and they also got a lot of free publicity out of the people who won. They made big deals out of the winners, they made commercials, put them in the paper, news channels would pick these stories up, and they'd also be able to put their winners up in the restaurants. To McDonald's, who were making $100 to $200 million off each turn of these games, giving away a small portion of that in the form of prizes really wasn't a big deal at all. They really weren't bothered who won as long as someone won, or as long as they could promote it. To try and promote the game, McDonald's would take the winners of all the cash amounts of cars and vacations, and they would put them in dozens of commercials to show that normal, everyday people just like you at home were the people winning these amazing, life-changing prizes. But the thing was, that wasn't true at all. Normal, everyday people weren't winning these prizes, because all of the McDonald's tearaway ticket games were completely and utterly rigged. When the rigging was discovered in 2000, it soon became clear that for over a decade, nearly the entire run of these games, the games had been infected, and normal everyday people didn't have a chance to win at all. In the year 2000, in the Jacksonville, Florida FBI office, a new FBI special agent, Doug Matthews, was speaking to his partner and senior agent, Rick Dent. Matthews noticed a post-it note on Dent's desk that read McDonald's Monopoly fraud with a question mark. Doug asked what this was about, and Rick gave it to him and said, "You can go and take a look at it because I haven't got around to it. But it could be a hoax, or it could just be someone trying to get someone else in trouble." Rick told Doug that there was a phone number on the back of the post-it note, and this number was for an informant who had called in a tip to the FBI. Doug called the informant, and the tipster told Special Agent Matthews that all of the McDonald's games were rigged, and all the winners were getting their tickets from someone named Uncle Jerry. The informant gave 3 other names and said they knew them to all be related. The first name was Robin Colombo, and the informant said Robin's husband had won a car. The second name was Robin's father, Buddy Fisher, who had won $1 million ticket. And the third name was Gloria Brown, who the informant said was a good friend of Robin's and who had also won $1 million ticket. A key thing to remember is that this was taking place in the year 2000, a very different time when it came to the internet. You couldn't just hop on the internet and do a little detective work. Social media didn't even exist. Agent Matthews looked into some government records and was able to in fact confirm that Robin Colombo was married to a man called Jerry Colombo who had won a Dodge Viper. Her father had won $1 million ticket, and so had her friend Gloria Brown. Matthews then went to Senior Agent Dent and told him what he'd been able to confirm. Dent immediately realized that something here was not right and went to the squad supervisor, Chris Graham. Rick, who was a mathematician, explained the odds of people in the same family winning, and there's not enough people on Earth to justify those odds. They then spoke to Assistant District Attorney Mark Devereaux to see if this would be something he'd be interested in prosecuting. Mark said yes, and the investigation began. At this time, Doug, Rick, Chris, and Mark only had these 3 names that the informant had given them. They had no idea what they were about to uncover, how many people were involved, how long this had gone on, and how wild the story really was. The first thing they decided to do was to contact McDonald's. They were taking a huge risk here because they didn't know how the contest had been infected. Maybe it was someone at McDonald's head office that was involved. The FBI began investigating everything they could about the game, and they invited McDonald's down to Jacksonville. McDonald's sent 3 people, including their director of global security, Rob Home. The FBI told them not to tell anyone that they were coming down to Jacksonville to meet the FBI. When McDonald's got down to the FBI office, the FBI agents were watching them very closely. They were looking for any signs of worry. They were trying to see if any of the McDonald's employees were involved. As someone who was involved in this would obviously be a little bit worried being called in by the FBI. The FBI sat down and told McDonald's everything they had found out so far, and the employees could not believe what they were hearing. They were beyond shocked. After a long meeting, the McDonald's employees went back to the corporate office in Illinois to discuss what they were going to do, as McDonald's was on the cusp of beginning a new game of Monopoly. The FBI had told them that it would be a good idea to go ahead with this game, as they could investigate it and hopefully find out not only who was stealing the game pieces, but how in fact they were doing it. McDonald's thought about this long and hard, and obviously running the rigged games meant none of McDonald's customers could win. McDonald's finally made their decision, and they invited the FBI up to their Illinois corporate office and told the FBI, "Let's do it. Let's run the game one more time." The FBI then went full steam ahead to investigate the infected contest. But first, they needed a name for their investigation. At that time, the current McDonald's competition that was going on was Who Wants to Be a Millionaire? And Who Wants to Be a Millionaire's game was also being rigged by the same individuals. So the FBI took inspiration from this popular game, and just like that, Operation Final Answer began. The first thing the FBI asked was for McDonald's to tell them everything they knew about any of the Monopoly or sweepstakes games. But being that McDonald's outsourced the marketing and the entire process of all of their promotions to Simon Marketing,
Fuck, I have
McDonald's
to go
had
get
approach Simon under the
poisons.
guise that they wanted to learn about the security process for all of the games.
Oh, well, it's
they didn't
alright.
want to tip off anyone outside of the very, very small group within McDonald's who knew that the games had been infected. So Rob Home, McDonald's director of global security, went to Simon and found out how they were securing the tickets and running the promotions. Simon was using a printing company called Dittler Brothers to print the over 500 million game pieces they used each time.
There's a
they ran
sizable
one of
force
the
of gnolls in camp
promotions.
there,
If you were
and from
to
what you
lay
tell me,
all
they
the
are tough
tickets out
ones.
for
It
one
must not
of
have
the
been
games,
easy for you
they
to
would
gather
stretch
this intelligence.
from New York
Here you
all
are,
the way
adventurer.
to Sydney,
We are grateful for
Australia.
your aid,
All of the
and if you
regular
haven't
pieces
already
that
done
were
so,
either not
speak with
winners
Marshal
or
Maris
would
and
win
Magistrate Solomon
McDonald's
within
menu
Lakeshore.
items were
Our
printed
situation
by
is ever more
Dittler,
desperate.
and all
Those
of the
two will have need of
high-value
you, I'm
game
sure.
pieces had an extremely secure procedure that they went through. Dittler Brothers would have what they called a winner run day, and at 5 a.m. all the necessary people and witnesses would assemble to witness the winner run. Observers from Simon Marketing, the heads of security for both Dittler and Simon, who happened to be a divorced couple, Marcia Derbyshire and Jerome Jacobson, and there was also an independent auditor along with a few
Warp
other
drive
Simon
active.
and Dittler employees. The head of security for Simon would access the high-value tickets vault that were kept in a vault that required 2 different people with 2 different security codes to open, kind of like a missile silo from the Cold War. The tickets were then cut out, counted, and placed inside an envelope. The envelope had a number on the front dictating how many high-value game tickets were inside. So say there were $2 million tickets, 2 $500,000 tickets, 5 200K, 5 100K, and 10 other tickets ranging from 10 to 75,000. They would write 24 on the front of the envelope, and every person who was there as a witness would sign the back of the sealed envelope where the seal was, and then each of the envelope's corners and along the seal were sealed with tamper-proof stickers. If you removed these stickers, it left a huge black mark void sign, so you would know it had been tampered with if anyone tried to remove the stickers. The envelope was then placed in a briefcase that had 2 combinations. One side, the head of security for Simon had the combination, and the other side belongs to the independent auditor. The briefcase was handcuffed to Jerome Jacobson, the head of security, who wore a bulletproof vest, and he and the independent auditor set off for whatever McDonald's packaging factory the winners were going to be inserted into. Once at the factories, the tickets would be randomly inserted into a run and then sent out to their destinations. No one knew and no one was supposed to know exactly where the high game pieces were. When it came to security at both Simon and Dittler, the heads of both the securities took their jobs extremely seriously. Jerome Jacobson was actually poached by Simon as he had previously worked for Dittler Brothers, and they poached him because he took his job so seriously. When Jerome was poached by Simon, he was given a $70,000 a year salary. Again, remember this is taking place in the late 80s and the 90s, so that's an amazing salary. He was flown around on first class to all the factories that he had to go to, and he had some other amazing benefits. Jerome and his ex-wife, Marcia, used to get into a lot of fights because Jerome would sometimes take things so seriously. He would follow employees to the bathroom, he'd check their bags, their pockets, in their shoes, the bottom of their shoes, all to make sure they weren't stealing. He also sometimes would look over the shoulders of the guards and get their combination and then start screaming and shouting because the guards let him do that.
Are you
After
stealing
McDonald's saw
monopolies?
how secure the process was, they were very impressed, but even more confused as to how someone could be stealing these tickets. Maybe you're thinking, were they stealing the tickets or were they forging them? But Simon had that covered too. When winners sent the winning ticket in, the envelopes were opened by someone wearing gloves, and the entire process was filmed. The tickets all had tiny errors in them, like chips out of certain words, that were changed every single competition, and there was also a special hidden code written on the tickets but could only be read under blacklight. So McDonald's
No
started running
way.
the competition
Always
again,
wondered
and
about
it
this.
didn't
Matthias
take long
finally
for
sent
the
another
first
agent to back me up,
million-dollar
eh?
winner to
Well, I hope
contact
he's ready to hear
McDonald's
some bad
and
news. I've been staking out this tower for weeks, adventurer. Recently, a major shipment came through from Duskwood, and along with it came those guards. What are they? Your guess is as good as mine. I can tell you one thing. They aren't human. Anyhow, the shipment had a chest, which is what I assume those abominations are guarding. The zombie with the spikes holds a key we'll need. Get that key, get in the tower, and uncover whatever is in that chest. Take your findings back to Matthias.
Aggro.
Fuck. Oh my god! It was instant! I didn't even get to say anything. It was just over. Well, there goes that. I gotta stop throwing my time down the hardcore, well, level 20, just dead. Boom, gone. Fucking Dust Devil on top of like 3 other mobs. Wow, I can't throw my time down that hardcore hallway anymore. I can't really actually do that. Oh, there it goes. Instant, just instant. Just instant. I don't understand what happened there. Did he resist the fucking... Did he resist the fucking pickpocket? What happened here? He did. It did. It just failed. Like the pickpocket failed and I died instantly. I died because a pickpocket failed.
The asteroid is depleted.
Well, that's what I get. Hardcore is an obsession. Does it bounce the mail? I guess. I don't know. Does it bounce the mail? Oh, no. Oh, well, no, the auction. Yeah, the alliance auction us. Well, oh, well. It was fun, but it's like, nah, release the spirit, and it's dead. It sucks. Well, yeah. You were fun. You were a fun character, but I guess I just had an instant get jibbed. With, like, just over a pickpocket fail. And that's why I gotta stay out of hardcore. Motherfucker. But, oh well, at least I did all this work on this other character. It's fine. SoD is like, kind of like, all I really want to do anyways. It's like, man, I like hardcore, but like, man, that was some horse shit. It was so quick. It was so quick. It was so quick. It was like no time for response or anything. It was just dead. Like I aggroed a town guard or something like that. Eh. Well, what can I say? It's unfortunate. I can't seem to get ahead on that. I can't seem to get above level 25. Keep losing rogues. That was a fun experience I had today, but like, I don't know. I think I'm having more fun on this. There's always more work to be done on this, and yeah, like I don't know. Hardcore's good, but like the server's dead now. On top of it, I like hardcore, but that was horse shit. Like that, it was gone. Poof, gone. I even blew like 2 gold on fucking swords and shit. Man, stupid ass fucking pickpocket fail. Pickpocket fail. I can't believe a pickpocket failed. Well, I mean, what can I do? It's alright. I can't play modes that steal my time or embarrass me. It's stupid. Over a pickpocket fail. So fucked up. So fucked up, man. Whatever. See if 76 is up yet. Change my title here. Oh, yeah, there's another rogue gone. Goddamn fucking pickpocket fail. Fucking robbed me. Yeah, worth a check. So there's other work I must do here. Gonna go back to the fucking barracks. This server is not dead.
A wondrous winter's veil to you. Little girl. Good children get special, discounts at any local Smokywood Pastures vendor. Yum. Hey, can you do Great Father Winter a favor, little girl? Not to needlessly talk about myself in the third person, but Great Father Winter has been at this all day, and he could use a treat himself. Some gingerbread cookies and ice-cold milk to wash them down with would really hit the spot. Think you could be a friend to the Great Father and fetch some for me?
Keep it real, yo. Hurry back.
3 gold?
The asteroid is depleted.
Glad I could help. Hurry back. Keep it real.
Fucking pickpocket failed. Why would pickpocket even fail ever? I think they took that out after Classic. Fucking pickpocket fail.
Let them know that he had won. The FBI then realized that a perfect way to strengthen their case was to speak to these winners under the guise of a recorded promotional interview. That's when the FBI had McDonald's bring in the person who had the most contact.
Don't let the
with
jingle
all
of the bells
winners.
take away
A
from the
woman
jingle in
named
your
Amy
pocket.
Murray, who
Buy
works
Smoky
in
with
the games
Pastures treats for
department
your Winter
of
Veil
McDonald's.
festivities.
When Amy was
Be sure to
told
tell
about
Great
the
Father Winter
Monopoly
what secret
game being
surprise you'd like to get
compromised,
this
the
winter veil.
FBI enlisted her help to get the winners to lie on the record. So the latest winners contacted Simon, and then Amy contacted them, and told them that they'd personally be coming with a camera crew to give them their check and hear the story of how they won. That's when the FBI geared up for an undercover investigation. They got some of their agents to pretend to be part of a production company, and they, along with Amy, went to speak to the latest winner, Michael Hoover. Shamrock Productions was going to be the name
I
of the
guarantee this bank's
FBI's
security with
production
my own blood.
company,
Is
and
that
they
good enough for you?
interviewed Michael Hoover.
Besides the
and
grunts
captured on
outside,
film his
my brothers
fabricated
and I
story
fought at the
about
Battle of
winning the
Hijal.
ticket. The
Any who
FBI
seek to
also
steal from the
tapped
bank must
phone
face
of
us
Michael
first.
Hoover, and the second the FBI left, Michael Hoover placed a phone call to a man named AJ Glum. Michael told AJ, "I can't believe it. They believed the whole thing." Hoover told Glum that he thought Amy liked him, and they also discussed the fact that Hoover told McDonald's, or unbeknownst to him, the FBI, that he was going to buy a boat with his winnings and call it Ruthless Scoundrel. But now the FBI not only had Hoover lying about how he won the ticket on camera, but they also had the recorded phone call about how he was going to spend the money, so they'd be able to seize all those assets. There is a wild coincidence about the wiretap involved with a key person in this case, but we'll get to that in a minute. So now they knew Michael Hoover had lied. They also knew someone named AJ Glum was involved somehow in this operation. By this stage, they'd also pulled a list of all the previous winners. Again, this was the 90s. It was harder to find connections between people. You couldn't just jump on the internet or go on Facebook and see who's friends with each other. So the FBI did the old-fashioned type of searching. In case you aren't a millennial like me or older,
Gifts,
back prior to
treats,
cell phones,
presents.
the internet,
I
and
say,
tech
those
today,
goblins
you used to
pollute
get
the
a
true
long
meaning
list
of this season,
all the
the
numbers you
Feast
dialed
of Winter
every
Vale.
month on
This
your
is
house
a time of
phone or your
renewal.
landline.
The land
So the
slumbers under
FBI
a blanket of
got
snow
these
brought forth
lists
by
of
Great
the
Father
winners'
Winter,
phone
who is
calls
not
for
the
the month
bumbling
they
fool
won,
over
2
there in the
months
red
before
suit.
they won, and 2 months
If
after
you're
they
interested
won.
in
They
learning
went
what the
through
feast
them
is all about
page
for
by
yourself,
page, line by
ask
line.
Segor
Finally,
and Crest
after
Strider.
searching and searching,
I'm
the
sure he'll be
agents
surprised
found
that someone
a
cares
common
about
number
history
that
rather than getting
every
presents.
single winner was calling at one stage or another. There seemed to be heavy activity before they won, activity when they won, activity after, and then they never seemed to call the number again. They looked up whose number this was, and to the surprise of everyone, the number belonged to the shoe checking and bulletproof vest wearing Simon Marketing's absolute head of security, Jerome Jacobson.
Jerome Jacobson.
So the FBI knew that Jerome Jacobson was Uncle Jerry, and he was the person who was acquiring and distributing all of these tickets. The informant had given them some other names, Buddy Fisher and Gloria Brown, and when the FBI looked further into the names and also just some of the wiretaps and other things that they were able to gather, they found out there was actually another Jerry that was involved with this scheme. So this Jerry was Jerry Colombo, and he actually was a recruiter for Uncle Jerry. There was a number of other recruiters, and we'll talk about them in a minute, but Uncle Jerry was acquiring the tickets, and we'll talk about how exactly he was acquiring these at the end, when I will also be speaking with the person who is the reason that this entire scheme came crumbling down. I went all the way home to Tampa to speak with this person, and we'll be talking about that at the end. But as I was saying, Uncle Jerry acquired the tickets. He would then give them to the recruiters. In the beginning, his only recruiter was Jerry Colombo, and Jerry would basically distribute the tickets for Uncle Jerry and then deliver a fee back to Uncle Jerry. So in the beginning, Jerry Colombo was using a lot of his friends, family, and extended family. For example, his wife, Robin Colombo, was quite involved with helping him pick who the winners were. Her father, Buddy Fisher, that's Robin Colombo's dad, was one who won the $1 million ticket. Also, Robin's brother-in-law won one of the $1 million tickets, and there also was her friend Gloria Brown who won one of the $1 million tickets. According to Robin Colombo and some other members of the family that I've spoken to, there was a lot of other schemes going on with Uncle Jerry and Jerry Colombo, one of which was the gray M&M.
The rules say if you find the gray plaster M&Ms, the winning bag could be worth $1 million.
And Robin Colombo has spoken about the fact that that is one of the things that they were involved too, along with Publishers Clearinghouse. Obviously, these are all just allegations. That's what members of the family have said. And when I've looked into some of these things, it does definitely seem plausible because, for example, if you look at the M&M thing, when you go back and look, the Mars company did actually give their marketing in the 90s to Simon Marketing, so they had the same potential people that were dealing with the M&M competition and sweepstakes that were dealing with McDonald's. And as I said, a lot of people talk about this being the McDonald's Monopoly scam, but it wasn't just Monopoly. They had every other game that they were gaming as well. So the way it would work is Uncle Jerry would acquire the tickets. He would then charge a certain amount per ticket. So for the $1 million ticket, he would ask for between 50 and 100,000, and then if it was 100,000, he would ask for 10, 20,000. It usually broke down like that. Now, each of the recruiters had a different fee, and I'll talk about each of the fees when I talk about each of the recruiters. So Jerry Colombo, he charged the winners half of what they won. So when you win $1 million game piece, you don't actually just get given $1 million. It's broken down in payments over 20 years. So you get $50,000 in the form of a check every year. Usually about 15,000 of that goes to taxes, dependent on, you know, what bracket you're in. And then there's 35,000 left. Jerry Colombo was taking about half of that, so it didn't leave the winners with a ton. And also, Jerry Colombo was the only recruiter who asked for some sort of money up front. So for example, Gloria Brown has spoken about the fact that she had to remortgage her home because she was a single mother, pretty much living paycheck to paycheck, which is, you know, how most people live, especially nowadays. And so she remortgaged her home, and she actually gave, you know, tens of thousands of dollars in cash on the side of the road to Jerry Colombo. And then whenever she would get her 50,000, 15,000 went in taxes, and he would usually come and take between 10 and 25,000, most of the time 25,000, and that left her with about $10,000 a year, which, because she'd remortgaged her home, she has spoken about how she was paying about $300 to $400 on her home, which, in a weird kind of story, if she must be very lucky or very unlucky how you look at this, she actually won her home in a competition before. So when she actually remortgaged her home, her mortgage went from like $300 to $400 all the way up to $1,000. So at the end of the day, when you add all that up and put all those factors in, she really was pretty much breaking even, maybe having, you know, a couple of thousand extra here and there. And then you have this kind of, you know, society and like your friends and family thinking, oh, you know, she's won $1 million, but it's really not what it seems. However, there was a major change of circumstance after just a few short years when it came to anyone who had won a ticket through Jerry Colombo, and we'll talk about that in just a minute. So as I was speaking about in the previous chapter about Michael Hoover and the FBI going with a camera crew to film everything about him winning and capturing on camera his story that they're locking him into, obviously, and then if this goes to trial, they're able to just turn on the screen and say, look, this is this person lying and saying they won this ticket this way. So it's very good evidence, and the FBI was like, how do we get this sort of evidence for other winners, the previous winners? So what they decided to do was they were going to organize a winners reunion, and obviously they didn't want to pay all this money to have this massive, they were talking about having a big reunion in Vegas. So what they did was they basically told the winners, oh, come to this hotel, we'll set up, we'll get your sort of story on camera, and then if you do that down the road, it's going to lead to this big reunion, all expenses trip paid to Vegas. So that was a big sort of push for the winners to want to go and do this, because it was going to result in this amazing trip. And they didn't really question it, because Gloria and some other winners have spoken about the fact when they did win, they got sort of a trip like this out of it, where they got to stay in a hotel for a few nights and, you know, be put up, and McDonald's paid for everything. So they held
McDonald's
these
pays for everything
interviews at the Marriott.
That's all they really
they
want.
had each of the
It's for
winners
McDonald's
come
to pay
in.
for everything.
They made a big board that had stars with all of the winners on it, and all of the locations they apparently won in, which a lot of those locations weren't true. The only time the winners had ever really been there is to go into the McDonald's and claim the ticket, claim that they won. So each of the winners did these on-camera interviews, and a lot of this information has been made available through like Freedom of Information requests, through other documentaries and things like that. And I actually talked about this case way back in very early 2020 when the McMillian show came out on HBO. I talked about this back on my original channel, and it's a very terrible video, but a lot of the stuff that I requested like way back then, I was able to get access to for this one. And also luckily I've been able to have relationships with some people that were involved or were family members of people involved, so they've been able to tell me some bits of information that weren't really made available before. The FBI got a number of these past winners to do interviews, and of course 2 of the most important interviews were the 2 named people by the informant, which were the interviews for Buddy Fisher and Gloria Brown. Buddy Fisher's interview, you can tell that he is extremely nervous and he is just pouring sweat. He was actually someone that was in the military, and a lot of his family members have spoken about the fact that he had never broken a rule or a law in his life. So whenever he was being questioned on camera about how he won his ticket, which he knew he had won in a fraudulent way, it seems as though it really, really was getting to him. Because even the FBI went as far as asking the winners in some of these interviews, oh, so no one, you know, gave you this ticket and asked you to turn it in? Like they really were saying things like that to them. So every time that he would say no, he would just pour more sweat. And one of the FBI agents has pointed this out before, but I thought it was pretty interesting, is when you look at a lot of these winners talking about how they won the ticket and they're telling the story, when you're telling a story of something that happened to you that you're based on your memory, you're not actually remembering when it happened. So they're not remembering, oh, when I went and turned this ticket in. You're remembering the last time you remembered something. So when you're accessing a memory like that, something like winning $1 million, that's not something that's happening to you every day. Something like that should be seared in your memory, that you can easily recall what you were wearing, you know, what you were doing, how it felt, things like that. Whereas if you're remembering getting up in the morning, you do that every single day. It's hard to say, oh, 2 Tuesdays ago I wore a pink hoodie, because things like that, they're not exceptions. So they're just kind of put in the back and not really remembered. Whereas something like this should be crystal clear, and you can see a lot of the people who supposedly won these tickets telling you a story, but they're sort of fumbling through their words, trying to make up how they won this ticket.
I found the insert, and I found the little tear-off tab.
Gloria Brown and the FBI agents have both spoken about the fact that In her interview, she was very guarded, and you can see she's just giving like quite short answers. And the FBI did say, you know, she didn't really want to give us anything. And Gloria Brown has said that she knew something was up. She knew that this wouldn't just be, oh, an interview and that's the end of it. She knew something was going to come of this, which I think is really interesting. So she must be pretty switched on to be able to pick all this stuff up.
I knew they wasn't asking me questions. The questions they was asking me was to just get it on record how I spent the money. And I was kind of numb walking out the door like, oh, this is it. Something is going to happen from this.
Because they didn't go in on her the same way they did with Buddy Fisher and say, you know, nobody told you to claim this ticket. So pretty interesting that she was aware that this was not what it seemed. So as I mentioned, Jerry Colombo was the only and sole recruiter for the early and mid-90s. And actually in 1998, Jerry Colombo and his wife Robin and their young son Francesco were driving on the highway. Robin was driving and their son, who was a few days away from being 3, was crying in the back of his car seat. Jerry was getting like aggravated by the sound, so he took the little boy and took him out of his car seat and lay him down on the back seat so that he could go to sleep. And 2 seconds later, their car was hit by a massive truck and completely totaled. Robin Colombo had to be cut out with the jaws of life, and their young son was completely unharmed apart from a broken arm. And when they looked in the back seat, his car seat, like his child seat, was completely crushed, and the only reason he survived was because his father took him out and lay him down on the back seat. Jerry Colombo actually was able to climb out of the car himself, but what wasn't known was that he had internal bleeding. He was flown along with Robin and Francesco to the hospital. He was airlifted there, and he spent a number of weeks in the ICU, and very unfortunately he succumbed to his injuries and passed away due to his injuries that he suffered in the car accident. When Jerry Colombo passed away, Uncle Jerry could have stopped and he still would have made a ton of money, but he would be basically getting away with it if he would have stopped. Because even if 10 years down the road someone had told the FBI, or even just people had talked and something had come out, they wouldn't have been able to really prove anything because it just would have been based on people's word of mouth. If it wasn't happening anymore, they wouldn't be able to listen to phone calls and, you know, speak to winners and find money that's being moved around. And a lot of the recruiters have also spoken about the fact that every time basically the competition ran, Uncle Jerry would say, this is the last time, this is the last one. I really think that if the tipster hadn't come forward, they would have been able to go on and on with this for who knows how long. Again, a lot of the people associated with this think that this in some form would have been going on today, still, if the tipster hadn't turned them in.
Maybe if certain things never happened, this Monopoly thing would still be going on today. It's true.
So Uncle Jerry knew that he needed to get more recruiters to be able to distribute all the tickets that he was still acquiring. He went to a man who had sold him a number of lots in South Carolina, and this man's name was Dwight Baker. He was a very well-known developer and devout Mormon, and he unfortunately got in an accident whenever he was working on some properties. Basically, the piece of machinery that he was driving stalled out and he fell back into this big kind of quarry thing, and he ended up injuring his back very badly, so he didn't even know if he'd be able to go back to work again. And there were some other things happening where Jerry saw an opportunity. He saw that Dwight was injured, that he had a lot of medical bills, and that he didn't know whether he'd be able to go back to work to provide for his family because he had
Aggro.
5 kids. Jerry approached him and basically said that he was in charge of distributing these game pieces, and that if he wanted $1 million ticket, it was going to cost $100,000. Dwight said he couldn't do $100,000 at that time based on his injury and hospital bills, but he knew someone who probably could. The final recruiter was AJ Glum, who I talked about a tiny bit in the earlier chapters, and AJ Glum actually I think was probably the most successful recruiter, because when he would pick his winners or ask his friends who he was going to give the tickets to, he would fly all around the US, so it wasn't as obvious as to what was going on with his winners of the tickets, because when it came to Dwight and Jerry Colombo, they were picking people in the same area, and when it came to Dwight, the FBI actually dubbed an area in South Carolina the Golden Triangle, because this small area of a few miles was where
you got lucky,
huge
Hunter.
amount of winners were coming from. AJ Glum also didn't charge any money up front.
Son of a bitch.
He charged Uncle Jerry's
rode
fee,
the
obviously,
elite.
and then he himself charged anywhere
Son of a
between
bitch.
10 to 60,000 based on what denomination the ticket was. AJ was brought in.
I can't
by
believe
one
it
of
was
his
this
friends,
much of a
Don
mess.
Hart, who knew Uncle Jerry. And Don Hart said, if you want to cash in this ticket, we can split it between the two of us and this other entity, which was Uncle Jerry. And AJ said, oh, I don't want to do it myself. So he brought in a friend, Stanley, and then they ended up splitting the ticket 4 ways. AJ then decided, hey, this is pretty easy. So he began distributing the tickets for Uncle Jerry and was working with Don as well. After a couple of tickets, Don then said, I'm out, I want to leave, I don't want anything. And then AJ and Uncle Jerry just worked together themselves. So to go back to speaking about Dwight actually brought in his foster son, George Chandler, and they were actually covered in the show McMillions, which went over this whole scheme as well. And one thing about that show is that the way they told the stories, it was each of the winners telling their story. So obviously people are going to want to paint themselves in the best light possible, especially when it's something like this where it technically is a crime and they're going to want to get people's understanding and sympathy. But Dwight actually did tell George Chandler that not to go screaming and shouting about this, not to do any of the interviews with McDonald's, and he ended up doing, of course, all of the interviews, which I'm sure I'm sharing on the screen with you. But whenever Dwight brought George Chandler in, he ended up telling him a bit of a different story. He told him that one of his friends had won this ticket, but he was going through a divorce and he didn't want the ticket to be shared out with him and his wife. And George basically said, oh, I understand that, because he had gone through a bad divorce himself, and then he ended up buying the ticket. Even though they report a lot of places that it was 100,000, that's what he was asked for initially, but he ended up paying 50,000 to Uncle Jerry because he couldn't come up with the entire 100K. Dwight asked George for a navigator and a laptop for orchestrating the ticket deal, and Baker then saw, hey, this is pretty easy. So he himself got involved with recruiting others for Uncle Jerry. First, he went to one of his friends who basically was like, I'll take 2 or 3 of those tickets, and he got some money off the back of that. Then Uncle Jerry approached Dwight with a bit of a different ticket. As I said, this happened for all of the McDonald's games, it wasn't just the Monopoly one. And this year that they were doing this, in 2000 and 2001, as that was when Dwight was recruiting for Uncle Jerry. One of the tickets was for $500,000, and the thing that was different about this one was that it was just going to pay out the entire $500,000. It wasn't going to be paid out over a number of years. So Dwight wanted this ticket, and he approached his sister-in-law about returning the ticket and then splitting the money. So while Dwight and his sister-in-law were working on cashing out this ticket,
kill him.
this was
Please kill him.
going on while the FBI was investigating. So the FBI spoke to McDonald's and told them to hold back the check because the FBI wanted to create a bit of panic and for them to think, oh, maybe there's some betrayal going on here, because that would tickle the wire. And tickling the wire means basically an action that they perform in hopes of getting people to go and make a phone call because they're obviously listening in on the wiretap. So say the FBI goes and visits someone, then when the FBI leave, maybe someone calls and says, oh my God, the FBI was here. Do you think they know about the McDonald's fraud? So they hoped that by holding this check back, that this would create some doubt with Dwight, and then he would maybe think his sister-in-law is cashing out the ticket or hiding stuff from him. So after it seemed like enough time had passed, the check was actually sent, and Dwight...
Damn it, what was that? I'm gonna kill you, I'm gonna kill you, I'm gonna kill you.
So he went
Kill
to
you.
where she was staying because they basically had to set up like a fake address for her, and he went to the Indianapolis airport to confront the sister as she was trying to run with the money. And Dwight ended up getting in the car with his wife, who she was obviously involved and knew the whole situation. And she was trying to call her sister on her cell phone. And whenever she went to end the call, because back then, you know, a lot of the phones were like the flip phones, so when you would end the call, you would just snap it shut. She didn't snap it completely shut, and she just put the phone down. So the FBI had a wiretap, so they were basically listening to everything that was going on in the car. It was like they were sitting in the car listening, and
Why?
they were talking about how
So
they were
stupid.
going to confront her, but some of the language was a bit ambiguous. So the FBI thought that they were going to hurt the sister. So the FBI raced to the airport, and they obviously didn't want to intervene if it wasn't going to be a bad situation, because that would blow the whole investigation. So they cautiously kind of made sure nothing was going to happen. Dwight confronted her, and then the two sisters, Dwight's wife and the sister-in-law, went to the bank, cashed the check, and split the money with them. After the airport situation, the FBI began looking even more at Dwight Baker, and they basically were really actively monitoring everything he was doing. Then very shortly afterwards, another ticket was being exchanged by Uncle Jerry and Dwight, and because Uncle Jerry lives in Atlanta and Dwight lives in South Carolina, they would usually just drive and meet. And the FBI one day got half an hour warning that they were going to meet, and they then followed them to this location to basically film everything about them meeting. And they even had a helicopter in the air that was filming them exchanging the tickets for money. And Dwight said that Uncle Jerry used to even sometimes bring a McDonald's Coke and cheeseburger or fries or whatever item that the tickets were supposed to be on, because that was one of the things that McDonald's did expect was, okay, this year we're putting the ticket on a soda cup, so the winner had to say, I pulled this off my soda. And Uncle Jerry would, stick the stickers on, and Dwight said he would just put cash in a brown McDonald's bag and give it to him that way. So the FBI, when they have pretty, for the 90s and early 2000s, it's pretty crystal clear footage of them meeting up and exchanging tickets. So since we've talked about wiretaps, I wanted to tell you about one really wild coincidental story that happened with this whole investigation, and I didn't want to put it in the earlier chapters because it wouldn't really make sense if I put it in this way, so it's just inserted here randomly because it's too good to not tell you. So this goes all the way back to the beginning of the investigation. Whenever the FBI or whomever law enforcement is putting in a wiretap, basically what they have to do is speak to the phone company. So imagine, I'm being wiretapped, I have Verizon, then they will put in the warrant to Verizon and let them know, we're tapping Ash's phone lines, etc. And they actually faxed Uncle again, early 2000s, they faxed the warrant and all the information to Jerry Jacobson's phone company, Uncle Jerry's phone company, to say, hey, we're tapping his phones, and they call it a Title III investigation. And the phone company, one of the people who worked at the phone company was Uncle Jerry's wife, but not only did she work there, her explicit job was to go and take all of the faxes off the fax machine and input all that information that was in the faxes into, the computers or to the relevant person. So when the FBI realized this, because again, back then you couldn't just look up someone on social media and be like, oh, they work here, they then panicked and they looked into, has she seen it yet or what's happening? And fortunately for the FBI, that day she wasn't at work. But can you imagine, before this thing has even happened, they're blowing their cover basically. If you'll believe it, there's an even crazier story about faxes and almost blowing the entire operation. So now we're going to go on to the next chapter, and to begin that chapter, I'll tell you that crazy story before we get too into it. So it's getting to the end of summer 2001. The FBI has pretty much all its ducks in a row. The only thing they cannot figure out is how is he stealing the game pieces. So the FBI and the Attorney General, John Ashcroft, decided, let's just go ahead with everything, and hopefully Jacobson himself will tell us how he was doing this when we arrest him. So they decided on August 21st, 2001, they were just going to arrest everyone at once, because then they wouldn't be able to tell each other, warn each other, or come up with any stories. Or one of the worst things would be if they arrest person one and these other people that are way down, other winners or other people involved, and they hear about person one being arrested, they could make a run for it or, come up with stories, do anything. So it was best just to arrest everyone at once. So in order to arrest everyone at once, because they were spread all over the US, they basically had to get the help of a lot of the other FBI departments. So the first thing that they were going to do before the arrest day on August 21st was that they would get everybody else up to speed. So they sent out this massive document that had everything about this investigation, all the surveillance, all the people involved, everything that you could possibly know about what was going on with this entire Operation Final Answer. So one of the agents goes to fax this massive document, again, fax 2001, and of course there's some speed dials like most fax machines, and they hit a lot of the offices, and there's one that just says Greenville, as in Greenville, North Carolina, but it didn't mean Greenville FBI office. It meant the Greenville News. So the FBI faxed a newspaper the entire document and outline of this entire investigation before they'd arrested anyone. And the paper has no obligation whatsoever not to report on this, because obviously they can go and report on something that they've been informed about. So a number of FBI agents and the prosecutor, Mark Devereaux, go to Greenville, and they go to the newspaper and basically, beg them not to release the information. They came up with a little barter of, okay, they won't publish the story until after the arrests, but they wanted the exclusive on the story, and they also wanted a picture to go with the story. So that is why the random newspaper of the Greenville News got the exclusive on the entire McDonald's monopoly operation final answer fraud. So now to the actual arrests. The first thing on August 21st, everyone is indicted. They indicted 8 people first, which were mainly the people who they knew for sure were involved. They indicted all of the middlemen, Dwight and Linda Baker, Linda's sister Brenda Phoenix, AJ Glum, Robin Colombo, who was already incarcerated, and then the people named by the tipster, Buddy Fisher, Gloria Brown, and of course they arrested Uncle Jerry, Jerome Jacobson. The middlemen were arrested and brought in, and for other people like Gloria Brown, people that basically turned in the tickets, if they cooperated and basically admitted that yes, this is something I did, the FBI just took their statement. But if they didn't, or they denied it, or they didn't cooperate, that's when they arrested them. They then went to the second layer of people, which was people like Jerome Jacobson's stepbrother Marvin, who was actually the first person to cash a ticket in 1988, and he and Jerry split it. The ticket was for $25,000. In total, they indicted 53 people with this scheme, and Jerry Jacobson immediately didn't speak. He is actually former law enforcement, so you pretty much expect that. He just didn't cooperate, didn't speak, and because he had never told anyone how he was stealing the tickets, nobody could basically tell the FBI how it was happening. Jerry then immediately hired a very fancy criminal defense lawyer, and they said, do not speak, we'll speak. In McMillions, one of the defense lawyers basically says his motto is, a fish wouldn't get caught if he kept his mouth shut, so that's their motto. So they didn't really have much of a defense, of course, because it's so obvious, and they followed it, like they'd done all the investigation while the scheme was happening, so they had pretty much everything, and they couldn't really have much of a defense, but it was just about making kind of a bit of a deal. So in hopes of getting a lesser sentence, Jerry basically completely cooperated with the government, and then he also told them how he did it. So how did he do it? You're going to be surprised and not surprised. So as I talked about in the very beginning, in order to bring these tickets to the factories and insert them into the production lines, Jerry had to take them from the printing facility, Dittler Brothers, and bring them to McDonald's packaging factories. So he was flown all around the US in first class.
I can't believe this stupid shit. Who pays for this?
You can go into the airport lounges. So that's what he would do. He would go into the airport lounges, and he would then excuse himself from the auditor, because he always had to travel with the auditor. Neither of them was supposed to ever have the briefcase alone at any time. And he obviously had the briefcase handcuffed to him, so the briefcase went with him to the bathroom. And when he went to the bathroom, he opened the briefcase, and he had one of the locks on the side, but the other lock, the auditor was only supposed to have the combination. If you remember, all the way back in the beginning chapter, I talked about how Jerry used to look over the shoulder of the people with the codes in order to open the vault, and this is obviously what he did with the auditor. He just looked over her shoulder and got her code. So after opening the briefcase, inside would be the envelope with all of the tickets inside. On the front, as I said earlier, there was a number denoting how many tickets were inside. So on the back where the seal was of course the sticker with the holograms that if taken off or tampered with would leave the void sign, and then there was the signatures along the seal as well. Jerry would then take a little penknife, because as I've said a lot throughout this video, it was the summer of 2001 and before, so it was before September 11th. And if you've never traveled before 9/11, or you're too young to have traveled before 9/11 and remember it, it was a completely different experience. You could show up very close to your flight time and just sail on through. You could actually meet people at their gate when they would come off the plane, because you just didn't have to go through security, you didn't have a ticket to go through security, and security wasn't what it is today. You could still wear your shoes, you could still have liquids, and you know, it's very different than it just didn't have the same sort of presence that it does now. So bringing a little penknife through, no one would have thought twice about it. So he would take the penknife and just underneath the sticker, just cut it open, and of course they're still gonna leave the void sign, but we'll talk about that in a second. So he would open up the envelope, dump out the tickets, and he would basically just take all of them because he knew there was at least $2 million ones in there, and there was all the other denominations as well. So he would put them in this little vest that he'd made specifically for stealing these tickets, and then he would take out a bunch of common ones that he'd brought with him and count out the amount that needed to replace whatever number was on the front of the envelope. He'd then put the commons back in the envelope and he would seal it with a little bit of glue. And then here's the key thing. The only reason he was able to do all of this, he would take out one of the metallic void stickers and just stick a new one over the top of the void sign, so it looks as though no one has removed a sticker and it's just the original one on there. He actually was sent a whole sheet of these stickers by mistake. Instead of the company who was manufacturing these stickers sending them to one of the executives, they accidentally sent them to Jerome Jacobson, the head of security. So he never ever would have been able to do any of this without those metallic stickers. And that's how he did it. A stupid shipping error that someone sent them to him. I mean, nowadays you could probably do this as well because you could just go buy them somewhere. I'm sure you could figure out where the stickers were coming from and just buy a sheet, but it's absolutely wild that some silly little error of sending the stickers to the wrong person in their address book has caused all of this, caused almost $30 million of fraud. And it's actually a lot more than that if we're being real here, because they couldn't actually prove a lot of the fraud for the early day winners because Jerry Colombo passed away, and they couldn't really, like, in a court of law, prove with evidence that these people won because they bought their ticket or were given a ticket by Jerry Colombo. Because he'd passed away, and a lot of the evidence for this case and the 7 people that didn't take deals with the government, those people that went to trial, a lot of the evidence against them was everything that the FBI was able to get through the investigation that was done by following the last game. If they had just stopped the year before, nobody really would have been prosecuted because they wouldn't be able to prove it in a court of law. And realistically, the number is much closer, probably way higher than 50 million, because there are still people that they have no way of even knowing if their ticket was got through legitimate ways or through fraud. And there is so many other things. Down the road, I'd love to do a video about the M&M's thing, or maybe some of the other fraud that was going on with Jerome Jacobson and some of the Colombos, because it's not really even known, because again, if they don't know, they can't investigate it. And there's a lot of stuff that I've heard about or been told about that still to this day it is unknown. But of course, a lot of it is hearsay and things like that because it hasn't been found out, so there's no actual evidence that you can really point to and be like, this is exactly how this happened, and so on and so forth. So it'd be a much looser video, but it's pretty interesting to think about. So due to the fact that Jerry cooperated with them, he was only sentenced to 37 months in prison, just over 3 years. And the way that they got a lot of these people was mail fraud, because that's pretty much how they will get you and things like that, where, you know, there's not a law in the book that says it's fraud to trade game pieces. Yes, it's deceptive and all these things, but they basically, because they've used the mail service, that was what they were doing when it came to breaking the law. And also, when it comes to things like this, where the mail fraud is involved, it's not that they're going to be prosecuted on what they have in their bank or what denomination of money they actually benefited from the scheme. It's how much they stole. So someone like AJ Glum, who ended up giving out tickets that were worth, you know, 10, 12, 13 million, he may have ended up with 600,000, but he was actually prosecuted for taking the 12, 13 million. So that's what his restitution is going to be. And Jerome Jacobson, his restitution is in the tens of millions. And you're never, ever going to pay that back. So a lot of these people are still paying restitution, but they pay something like $140 a month. Like, it's really not anything.
To this day, I pay $160 a month.
And quite honestly, it's really not a lot of consequences for 10 plus years of stealing millions of dollars, of living this amazing high life, and I would be shocked if there wasn't some sort of contingency plan with money squirreled away for a rainy day or for the inevitable day that everything came crashing down.
If you had to do it again, would you do it again? Tomorrow. Tomorrow.
We're not finished yet because we've got to find out who the informant was, and I'm going to speak to someone who was the reason that all this came crashing down. But I would really, really know, what would you do? What would you do if somebody came to you and said, this ticket is for $1 million, you can cash it in and have 50K for the next 20 years, or, you know, one of the 100K tickets, you get 100K, like that, okay, taxes and everything. What would you do? I mean, really, honestly, what would you do? Before we go on to our last chapter about the informant, there was one other weird thing that stood out, and it's quite interesting. When going through the list of winners, there is one winner that really stands out from all the rest from 1989 to 2001, and that was in 1995. The winner was St. Jude's Children's Hospital, and what happened was, around Christmas 1995, St. Jude's opened an envelope, and inside was, anonymously, $1 million game piece. Now, there was a lot of news, publicity around this, of course, St. Jude's and McDonald's, and they ended up not transferring the ticket because McDonald's, even in some of the news reports, says tickets aren't transferable, but they ended up giving St. Jude's $1 million donation. So this ticket was actually sent in by Uncle Jerry, and it's really interesting looking at things like this because obviously I talk about fraud a lot on this channel, and there's a lot of people, like even look at Sam Bankman-Fried recently, that they do all these terrible things, but they will try and either justify it to themselves or try and do things to put a lot of things in the positive column when they're doing all these negative things. And with Uncle Jerry, he thought that this would actually look favorably on him if he was ever caught. But there was one other thing that he was trying to use as a get out of jail free card, to use a Monopoly reference, and that was that, unbeknownst to McDonald's, Simon and Dittler, when they were running this program that would determine which state or area the winning game pieces would go into at the McDonald's packaging factory, they were actually excluding Canada when they should have been using, you know, all 50 states and Canada. But really, Simon and Dittler, if ever Canada or a region of Canada was chosen, they would just run the program again. So Uncle Jerry thought that this would be like a good bargaining chip if he ever got caught. Although when Uncle Jerry was caught, it wasn't Simon or Dittler who caught him, it was the FBI. And if Canada wasn't being included was the last thing on Simon and Dittler's mind, because a few days after Jerry was Brothers arrested, the FBI went in and closed Simon Marketing and Dittler Brothers down, and, you know, got a lot of the documentation out of there because they were unsure if there was anyone else involved with this, with Jerry Jacobson. And what ended up happening is this entire thing with Jerry Jacobson caused Simon Marketing and Dittler Brothers
I'm not going to do this
be no
quest right
more.
now.
Simon Marketing had offices all around the world, and they actually, at the time when all of this came out, Simon Marketing had the single largest drop on the stock exchange. They went from shares at about $100 down to 50 cents in one day. All of the offices were closed, and everyone at Simon Marketing and Dittler Brothers lost their jobs. And that's why, after two really heavy stories of Danny Masterson and the Murdaugh murders, I wanted to do a bit of a lighter thing.
Yeah,
but it's still important.
This one was good. Okay, guys, I'm gonna stop here as I am at the end of the shift, and it has been a very good shift. And I lost the hardcore character, but I learned that I just don't seem to have the luck with it. I should stop trying. That one was so fast I couldn't have even responded to Vanish. It was just gone dead, 100 to 0 in under a second. So, but I will be on here in a few hours, and thank you so much for your time. This session will be posted to YouTube here in the next 24 hours, and you have been watching Skycat Live. You can sub to me on Twitch if you wish to, or if you're seeing me on YouTube, you can come and click on the cast face to donate. And thank you so much for your time. I will see you later. I love you guys. Y'all have a good day. Take care.
Docking permission requested.